All right, welcome to Toolkit Tuesday for May. Can you believe we're already in May? This year is clipping along. So I am going to open up the presentation. Remember, once I open up the presentation, I can't see you. So jump right in if you have a question or put something in the chat box. I can hear you, but I won't be able to see you once I open up the presentation. So just jump in if you have something specific. You guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, we did all our check-ins because we need the introductions. Going back a little bit, just what our mission is and our vision and our goal. So I just want to talk about goal. Provide safety moments, checklists, templates, and initial consultations at no cost to churches. That is the goal. We have flyers around our event for August. You guys should have gotten some information in your emails. If you don't have it, let us know. I would love for you to invite other churches to come out and join us for that. So I'm going to take us back to the beginning to our safety versus security. This is where people get tripped up so many times. So if you look at the timeline, there's only one spot in this timeline for security. But again, if you Google church security, you get 1 million hits. But if you Google church safety, you only get about 5, and I think we're one of them. And so I just want to keep bringing us back to the fact that planning and training are the most important things. And we'll talk about that a little bit as we get into the presentation. Security is reactive. They show up when somebody calls them and then immediately have to stand down when first responders show up. So their role in an event is very limited. So we want to make sure that the other teams are trained. Your parking lot teams understand it, your greeters understand it, your ushers understand it, and that they're working in lockstep with the security team. There's more of them than there are security most times. They see more by being in the parking lots and being at the doors than the security team see. We also want them to protect the security team. And what I mean by that is, as much as the security team can be anonymous, it's much better for everyone, as opposed to them getting pulled into things like, excuse me, there's no tissue in the bathroom, or have you seen my kid? You know, we don't want the security team to be focused on things that would take them away from their primary duties. So how do we help the other ministries communicate with them? So communication is a big piece of it. Anybody remember components of an emergency response plan? We talked about this way back at the beginning. What should be in your plans? Anybody remember? No? All right, let's have a quick refresher. So we'll always talk about the fact that there's no guarantee of what you plan is the scenario that occurs. So the whole point of doing this is to just keep it top of mind, so that if a scenario happens, people do one of two things. We talk about this all the time. What are those two things? What happened? What's the two things people do in an emergency?
Panic.
Well, that's what we're trying to avoid here.
Yeah.
Yeah, they either rise to the occasion, and I always bring people back to 9/11. Remember the people on the United flight for 9/11? They all try to do something. So people will either rise up and rise to the occasion, or they'll fall to their training, meaning that subconscious training that you've been doing over time will come back to them about what to do. So it's the one or two things that happens. This is the incident command sheet that is on our website. You guys should all have a copy of it. I think we emailed everybody a blank of it. How many people have started filling this out and have people in these roles yet? Anybody? Okay, so that's part of your plan. So keep this top of mind. Again, you can download it from the site, but a person's name needs to be in this box. And what you cannot do is put a person's name in the box that doesn't know their names in the box. So they have to be engaged in the role. and understand what their role would be if there was an emergency, okay? We talked about pastoral care. That one's always important to me because if a pastor is on his stage in his pulpit and something happens, if that pastor doesn't know where his wife is, where his kids are, he's limited to pastor that community in that moment. So you need to talk about your mutual aid partners. For us, it is Salvation Army. They will deploy chaplains to us. You can do the same for wherever your location is until that pastor is in position. Even if this is a church with multiple campuses, those pastors are still engaged at their campus at the moment and cannot get to the other campus to start helping pastors. So having a mutual aid partner and knowing who will pastor you in the moment is very important, okay? We talked about training. So we talk about a lot about the safety moment videos, like the ones on our site. They're like 60 to 90 seconds. Excuse me. But we also want to talk about that situational training and classroom style training, which is what LaDonna and Gary were both just referring to. And we can do some of the situational things at the conference, particularly if we have the right groups there, right? If the ushers are there, the greeters are there. How many of you use your facility for like folks who aren't necessarily members of the church, but they use the facility for meetings or events or conferences? Anybody?
Yes, we host a AA meeting several times a week.
So when those folks come in and they're using your facility, do they know where the evacuation routes are? Do they know who to call if there was an emergency? So how do you inform those folks who are outsiders? So once we get your folks all trained, how would you inform those folks who are outsiders how to utilize the facility and what to do if there was an emergency? Because there's sometimes where even if they're not, there's events where there's not staff, right? Like let's say there's a Tuesday night PTO meeting or a knitting club or whatever, or someone there teaching a class that's not necessarily part of your regular curriculum, that person would need to know, like, what would I do in an emergency? So even just as something as simple as developing a one-page sheet that says, if somebody's using the building and there's no staff person here, or someone's using the building and no one from our regular congregation is here, here is what we give them when they sign up to use it. Something that says, here's what you do for fire, weather, medical emergency, or active shooter, right? And then we want to talk about drills. So we typically do drills, or we used to, twice a year, spring and then fall. So this is where your plan all comes together, right? So go back to that incident command sheet. We take those people through an actual drill. You start off as a tabletop drill, particularly for your senior team. And that is where you have to start. Pastors, executive pastors, deacons, anyone who is senior staff or senior management should go through tabletop drill first. And then we should take everyone through a physical drill. If you have radio communication, this is when we practice radio communication. What do you say over the radio? We want plain speak, not Alpha, Delta, Bravo. Like no one's gonna know that or remember it, right? So you just want to say, oh, we have an incident by the front door. Someone slipped. They've hurt their knee. They're elderly. Can you send someone here? Is it an emergency? Is it not an emergency? Like, is the person unconscious? Are they bleeding? Like, how quickly do I need to get there? Those are all things we want to teach around communication. And the best way to do that is in a drill. Education. The education is ongoing. This goes back to those safety moments. We have some on the site. We're going to keep adding some to the site. And people are using them, I found out, one or two ways. Either they're doing it in a huddle, like you see these guys on the left of the screen. They get together before service and they have their prayer time and they talk about a particular safety moment. And if they have the capability, they're showing a video. And then we have people who are sending them out to their teams prior. So let's assume you're going to have people serve in your nursery or your children's ministry on Sunday. They're getting an email like that Wednesday before, great to see you this coming Sunday. You're going to serve in this particular role. And here's our safety topic for the week. If they don't have a way to show the video, they're sending the video and a link in that email. So that's how they're using that. It's very good idea to keep it top of mind so that you're kind of always thinking about it. Uh-oh. I froze. Not moving. The slide's not moving. Oh no. There it goes. All right, technology is one of the things we've talked about a couple of times. Has anybody started looking into Slack or PulsePoint? So that, I believe, is also on the site. This is where, once we have your plan developed, we want to put the copy of that incident plan so people can open it up. I really like Slack a lot because it allows the teams to communicate without talking. And I'll show you some more tools about that as we go in a little bit further. But technology is really good. PulsePoint is a good one. If you have an AED in your church, then PulsePoint tells people exactly where it is. It's an app. I believe it's free, and it's not designed specifically for churches or for any particular location. It works if you're in a mall. It works if you're in an airport. It tells you where the closest AED is. So it's a really good tool. But the Slack tool I like a lot because you can build out different channels. So security can have their own channel. You can have a crisis channel. The greeters can have their own channel. They even have a channel, or folks built a channel for like a suspicious person. Like, this person has been here 2 or 3 times. We feel like there's something about them we need to pay attention to. They put a picture and a description in Slack, and now everyone can see that. So they're more conscious of what's happening. The little form in the middle is something we use called FormStack. FormStack is how we create and generate incident reports, particularly if you've had a medical incident, someone's gotten injured on your property, something has happened, to keep that information and keep track of that information. We live in a very litigious society. Everybody likes to sue everybody. So to have that FormStack built out, collect all the information in the moment. If Sister Smith comes back a year from now and says, I broke my ankle on your property and I haven't been able to work, you don't have any data if you didn't write that down in the moment and keep track of that. So you want to keep track of that. I'll tell you that insurance companies are very excited about emergency response plans, and in some instances are starting to require them. We used to be able to give them a overarching plan for all of our campuses, kind of a glossed over, here's what we do. And now they're starting to ask for more detail in the emergency response plan. What would you do if? So it helps your insurance rates, certainly if you have a plan. This one is about coordination, which is, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Connie.
I'm sorry. Any way that, and maybe it's my screen, that you could make that bigger?
Oh,
No?
I don't know how to do it.
I think my Pastor Si was trying to take notes and see what was there. Am I correct, Pastor Si?
Yeah, it was. I had found my notes before on the components of emergency response plan, and so I was just adding, trying to see on the screen and add to what I had from last month. Yeah, it was, even with my 4 eyes, it's still a little small.
I know.
Well, I'm sorry to tell you, I do not know how to make it bigger, but I'm happy to email it to you and it will be on the site after this. So you can...
I just want you to know that you are seen.
Very good. All right, so this one is around coordination and the coordination between ministries and departments and first responders. Again, we've talked about this a couple of times, how you really want to invite first responders into your building. And any other tenants, if you have tenants in your building, you want to invite the first responders in. You have maps or blueprints of your building, you want to offer them those. If they need to do training, I just saw rather large church on the south side did this. I got there for a meeting and their parking lot was filled with first responders. Hey, what's happening? My immediate thought was there was an emergency, but no, they were giving them the building to train in. And that's very helpful to them because they like to train different scenarios. And it also is helpful to you because they will get to know your building. Okay. So if you have a relationship with the folks in your district, your police officers, you want to invite them into your building. Communication. Communication is probably the biggest part of the whole plan. So communicating with the ministries, the volunteers, staff, emergency response team, our mutual aid partners, which we just talked about, and parents. Why is parents a big deal? Anybody remember? We talked about this.
Children's ministry.
Well, why?
Let me see.
Because they're typically away from the kids.
That is true. But what we want to do is we want to educate them early so that in the event of an emergency, they are aware that you have a plan. They know how that plan is going to be carried out. They know where their children are going to be. Absent of that, feeling secure about how emergencies are handled and where their kids are going to be, it will be a total disaster. I say that because my son is 31 years old. And if he is in a building and I'm in a building and there's an emergency, your innate parent heart kicks in and you're trying to get to your kid, right? Everybody's going to do it. And so if you have 40 people rushing to the kids ministry to try to pick up their children, that's going to be a problem. You got a lot of problems. You got an active shooter who is potentially there and they're crossing their path in the hallway because they're rushing to get the kids as opposed to going out the door. You got the parent who ends up by the room and is banging on the door to get in, but you can't let them in once you've gone into lockdown because I can't jeopardize 30 kids in this room to open the door for one parent who potentially the armed gunman has and is asking them to make sure they get the door open for them, right? So if you can create something when people come, particularly new parents, this is our protocol, this is what we do. Here's where we go if there's a fire. Here's where we do if it's a weather. Here's what we do if there's a campus evacuation. And we can talk those things out more. We can go into more detail. If it's possible to create a text system, like there's mass text systems, collecting that parent's phone numbers when they come to bring the kids and check them in so that they know you'll get a text message as to where your kids are if we have to evacuate this campus. Do not come to the children's ministry. Now, are people still going to try and come? Absolutely. But the more you can communicate that early, that they know that there's a plan, they feel like it's a well thought out plan, one that they can live with, they'll go, okay, I know my kids are going to meet me at rally point X if it's a fire. I know that they're going to be lowest level in the gym if it's weather, right? Just so they know where the kids are going to go. That needs to get communicated and reiterated early and often. That's a big one. And it doesn't need to be elaborate, but it does need to be communicated. So once we have the plans kind of all put together, parent communication is one of the biggest pieces. The other one is going to be around media. So if there's an emergency at your church, something happens that is newsworthy, the media is coming. So who's going to talk to the media? Preparing media statements, kind of just around those topics. Here's our media statement for a fire. or weather, and then you can plug it in with the specifics, right? But something that you already have a framework, and you need to say to your volunteers and staff, if the media shows up, and this isn't in the moment, this is now. This is when the plan is developed and we roll out training of the plan. If the media shows up, only this person is to speak to the media. I lived through it where the media showed up on our campus and put a microphone in everybody's face that walked out the door. It is a nightmare. You do not want it. So having that designated media person is really important. And then obviously the communications between teams, and that's one of the things we're going to work on for between now and the conference and at the conference. So OAA, I think I talked about this one a while ago. Anybody remember what the acronym means?
Observe, act, and what was the other A? I can't remember.
Oh, you're close, Gary. That's pretty good, actually. It's observe, assess, and then act. So observe is the first one. So what are we observing?
The event that's going on, or suspicious people.
Anything in particular?
The vulnerable, observing vulnerable populations and entry points.
Well, that's for sure. We want to make sure we know where those folks are and how to get them out. But in this instance, we're observing things like posture. We're observing clothing, demeanor, resistance, determination. So if somebody is determined, it's almost like Gary, we talked about in that event last week. If this is a domestic and they come in the door and they're looking for Gary, they're focused on, I want to see Gary. I want to see Gary. Everything outside of that is a problem for them, right? And so how do you address that? Back to Gary kind of beat me to the punch. I was going to talk about verbal judo right here, but how do you use some verbal judo to de-escalate that situation? In terms of posture, for me, one of the big indicators is people who just look right through you. You're talking to them. Good morning, how are you? Welcome to ABC Church. And you're trying to get their attention and they literally are looking right through you. They're not trying to engage you. They don't want to stop and have a conversation with you. That's very important. Clothing is very important. Do they have on a big trench coat and it's 90 degrees outside? Do they have on all black and a hoodie and they're trying to cover their face, right? So these are the things to observe. And then the next one is assess. What are we assessing and how?
The threat.
How?
By what we're observing, right? Or we're assessing the threat based upon what the observations you just went over.
Right. I want to always make sure that the guest people, so the ushers, greeters, parking lot folks, don't cross over into being security people. So I don't want them detaining people, right? I want them to, this is where the communication and the working hand in hand comes. So always in a living posture, 2 people if possible, one of those people with some form of communication, a radio or a phone. Always welcome the person, ask questions. Good morning. I haven't seen you here before. Are you new? What brings you to our service today? You're trying to gather, first you're trying to engage them. You've observed them, you think they're a potential threat, and now you're trying to engage them by assessing whether or not they are. And the person could have on, something that looks strange to you, and then they explain, oh yeah, I got this on because I'm carrying my kids' toys in one arm, and the bag might have looked too big, and you realize it's, somebody carrying their kids' hockey sticks because they're going to play a game, whatever. But you won't know that unless you get up close enough to them to have the conversation. Ask the questions, don't accuse, and then attempt to de-escalate if they are escalating. If they are refusing to talk to you, if they are walking straight past you, if they are approaching you with any kind of vigor, how do you attempt to de-escalate that? Oh, you wanted to see Gary? I'm so sorry he's not around, but can I get someone else to talk to you in a moment? Because you're trying to create time and space to let the second person step away and make the call for help. The last one is act. So the one person steps away, contact security or first responders, and keep your eye on a suspicious person as possible without incident. The other part of this is a lot of churches at the end of the service, the pastors have like a welcome line, greeting line where they talk to parishioners and people walk up to them. And so one of the things we talk to is about training the pastors on something called 1, 2, 3. You guys ever done that, Gary? Yeah. So 1, 2, 3. Let's assume that pastor is standing there talking, and they're concerned about the person that's there that they're talking to. So if they put up one finger, it means, oh, I'm okay. You guys can leave me, or you can stay, bye, but I don't feel threatened by this person. If they put up 2, it means I want you to stay close. I need a second person here close to me. And if they put up 3, that means to intervene. And they do it in all kinds of ways. I can't show you because you can't see me, right? Or can you? Can you see me? Because I can't.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so I didn't know. So they're typically doing something like up against their face or on their collar. They're doing, 3 is like, okay, can somebody come? I feel like this person's a threat. So that's one of the things that we work on with pastoral teams. Why am I thing keeps freezing?
So I have a question,
Go for it.
and I apologize for my tardiness.
Uh-oh, that's deep. Hey, Deep.
Hello, everyone. I'm multitasking. So your engagement with the greeters, can y'all hear me?
Yeah, Connie is breaking up over there, but she's trying to say the Deacon Coleman is what she's trying to say.
Right. You got to get the introduction right.
You all are too kind, too kind. But the engagement with the hospitality or greeters, what happens in recent times, 21st century kind of stuff, anybody that's in proximity of a mental deranged person or somebody that's on a mission, and you're trying to apply those practices, what would you suggest for that individual? Now, this is the unexpected, right? I'm kind of going somewhere with that. So what would the expectations be for the unknown? How would we kind of process that or explain that?
I don't know.
Because that's a generic normal circumstances that we assume that there is some level of sanity or some level of I'll use sanity. So what would you suggest for greeters, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I think that is a whole class within itself. This mental health piece is one that we're going to do at the conference.
Let's not use mental health. Let's even though all of it will kind of come back to mental health, but let's just talk about a person who is determined or who's on a mission, and we have our greeters doing what they do.
The challenge is and we talked a little bit about before you came on, is you could quickly go from being the victim to being the aggressor, right?
Right.
But you can't put your hand on them. The only way you can put your hand on them is the police are on scene and they've asked you to assist, right?
Okay.
For that, you got a legal problem if the person's this close to your face and you start touching them. So it's all unexpected, in my opinion. So the most you're going to be able to do is move yourself away for safety and try to get first responders, security team and first responders on the scene.
Okay.
In light of Deacon Coleman's, I'm thinking, does Chicago, maybe this is a crazy question, does Chicago or Illinois have such a stand your ground kind of law?
No,
No,
No? Okay.
no.
They
Matter of
have,
fact, Illinois is one of the toughest gun laws, gun laws in the in the United States.
yeah,
Okay.
So, but what about this, Angelina? So as we're teaching these practices, we need to teach our greeters and ushers some level of space capacity, observing, looking for facial content, because someone who's kind of focused and determined will
mhm,
have, in most cases, a particular look.
mhm,
So you definitely want to have space, and you want to speak to the individual. Give yourself some room, and so if that person is not responding to you, then you know something else is up. So then they can kind of like remove themselves, and hopefully, with your postings and position, you have trained people that can kind of move in to handle a situation when a person is not responding. They're focusing on something else, because they can have a handgun or knife or something in their waist. So I guess what I'm trying to say in these kind of practices, these kind of conversations, it won't hurt for your greeters and ushers to go through some kind of technique, some kind of training of awareness, number one. If you're speaking and they're not responding, or they're responding in a particular type of way that's not considered normal, you still want to, heighten your awareness. Get some space and distance between yourself, and keep watch on them or whatever. So I mean, it's a process. It's an undetermining factor. We don't know, but
right.
we just try to do the best we can to kind of keep some space in if we're not getting the kind of feedback that we're looking for from a normal type of situation.
So before you popped in, Gary and LaDonna were asking about scenarios at the conference. So I think we know who's going to train that now.
Okay.
You just walked yourself right into that one.
Wow. I just know to be quiet on this whole section now.
We're just asking about scenarios, and scenarios is something that we do intend to incorporate. So yeah, we'll talk about
May I
that.
make a comment? I'm sorry.
Sure.
Was that the deacon?
That was the Deacon
Oh,
Coleman.
Lord.
Yes, I needed to be clear.
Y'all are putting fresh on me.
But it's more or less like a comment, just from what I've observed and everything that he's saying. I agree with you totally, sir. In regards to that, and like Angela was saying, as far as everyone being observant, from the parking lot to the greeters to the ushers or what have you. But by the same scenario, and we've had it happen at our ministry, someone came in fully, you thought that nothing was wrong with them at all. Came in, fresh suit, very happy to be here. I've been heard about this church and this, that, and the other, and it went all the way left. So you have to just be, I would say, along with the training, but prayerfully their discernment and just having a watchful eye, not being paranoid. But by the same token, being observant, and like if it is something that, okay, we spoke to this guy in the parking lot and this is what he has on and he's coming into the sanctuary. It might not be anything, but at least then, which like you said with the chain, the text or the Slack or what have you, to be kind of watchful, give them space, because then that can agitate them as well. Because if they're already on high alert and thinking, okay, now you just looking at me and this, that, and the other, and it might be something completely different, and we push someone away from getting to Christ.
Well,
If that makes sense.
oh, I'm sorry. May I comment?
Go ahead.
You're absolutely right. Here's the thing. It's not a one size fit all, right? There's something
Correct.
intuitive, there's intuition, there's a lot of things that will come into play. First of all, let's talk about some of the things that you can put in place, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I when I was running the security at Fellowship, I had a concept of a triangular effect. You know, I got that from the Bulls. They had a triangle offense or defense or whatever.
Yes, sir.
And so what I'm saying is you're not alone. So if you position yourself one front, one back, one on the side, right? That's a 3-to-1 ratio.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so while everybody's doing what they're doing, you have to do it in the name of the Lord. You got to greet them in the spirit of the Lord. Hey, welcome to so-and-so. We are so glad to have you. Is this your first time here? Yes. What's your name? I'm so-and-so. So you try to engage them in a Christian way where they don't,
Correct.
you know, they don't suspect that you're really trying to figure them out, right? So
Right.
if you're giving them the love and you're not getting the love back, then you pull back. You pull back and determine and kind of feel that energy, right? But remember, you got three people on one. And so what we do is hopefully we'll have security mixed in with that. But like you said, it's different scenarios, different practices, different things. It's a lot of different plays that can be instituted. But one thing you don't want to do is overreact. That's why I say
Correct.
if you keep the Christian flow with observing and kind of filling the person out, and then that's only going to tell you some things. It won't tell you everything.
Correct.
We had a gentleman that come into church Sunday, and had a hood, and not only did he have the hood on his head, but he had a backpack on over the hood on the back, and he had the drawstrings to pull over his face, right? And he's walking kind of weirdly, and he goes down to the lower level. And so I got out of where I was, right?
Right.
Because I'm retired, right? I'm not in the flow no more. But I went
That's
down.
what you say. But go ahead, sir.
I went down to find out, to observe what's what. And he went into the men's room and he began to wash himself up. And I guess, I'm okay, no harm, no foul. He washes himself up. I'm not gonna make a big issue about that. But I was watching him, and anyway, nothing came about it. So when I did question some of the personnel, like, well, did you see this guy come in? Nobody moved. Nobody went to investigate. What's going on?
Right,
Don't be
right.
talking in your mic when you're there. It could be too late. So it's a lot of things that we have to practice and we have to, put in place. So and this is what I really want to bring out. So when something happens to that effect and God graces us and nothing happens, you put a protocol in place for things like that. So if you have the ability to have a roamer, somebody that can roam the building, immediately be notified, hey, we got this in the first quadrant, lower level, check it out immediately, boom, let us know what you find. So now everything moves seamlessly. Somebody's coming from different sections, checking this out, whatever. So it's ways and it's strategies to do that, but everybody got to be on a board, has to be aboard. And we have to really kind of, for urban Black churches, level the playing field. If you have a position, you have a responsibility. I don't care if you usher, greeter, deacon,
Absolutely.
whatever the other auxiliary groups you have, everybody plays a role. Because guess what? If something happens, you will be playing a role.
Right. Everybody be impacted. The only
May
thing
not be the role you want to play, but you'll be playing it. So
yeah, and I appreciate everything you're saying. I serve on the security team, so I'm very familiar with things that you were saying, and I agree with you 100%. So thanks for sharing that.
well, thank you. That makes me feel good.
The only thing I'll say to that is we have to, as we continue to reach out to people is understand that there's that 200-person church out there with one person.
Yes.
So I come from a mega church standpoint.
What was that? What was that about one person? I'm sorry, Angela. I missed that last one.
Conscious that there's a smaller churches. The average church size is 70 to 200, right? And they may have one security person. They don't have a safety team and a greeter team and this team and that team, right? So we can set it up for this, but we need to also be very conscious that there's that small church who needs this information, and how do we make it bite-sized for them? So if I just, think about who's on the call. Renice is at a mega church. I'm at a mega church. Pastor Phil's church is sizable. The Deacon Coleman's church is sizable, right? And so how do we make sure that we are helping people where they are, right? What does that guy with one person do? What does that church do? So I just want us to be conscious of the fact that we may not be able to use the bull strategy, Deacon Coleman. They might not have 3 people.
Well,
So-
I have another strategy.
Okay.
So here's the thing, you have to use what you have.
Oh, for
Right.
sure.
How many churches got doors?
Everybody's got doors.
All right. Introduce yourself to that door next Sunday or whenever and say, hello, security door, how are you? So I said that jokingly, because sometimes when you assess your building, right? Sometimes we leave all doors open, right?
Mhm.
That don't have to be open.
Absolutely.
And they're not a part of ingress, egress. They're just space. So we want to make sure that we kind of cut those pathways off, right? So lock the door, that becomes your security guy.
Absolutely.
Cut off this entrance, no admittance, whatever signage and that kind of stuff. So that helps to do that part. So where you're limiting now that pathway for which they're to come. So now you will possibly have enough people to cover that in and out piece. You know what I'm saying? I've seen some places where you come up the stair, come in the building, come upstairs into the sanctuary, come out of the building, down the stairs, out the door. That's their flow. One way in, one way out. And so you can manage that. And there's a lot of churches that's kind of set like that, where you can kind of manage that. But it's just you have to start with assessing and looking for the vulnerabilities, looking for the weak spot, looking for the risk factors. And then let's
start to think about what scenarios will look like. I want to make sure we talk about this is something that can help a smaller church, a medium-sized church, a larger church, right? I think we got to think about it in that way. So that I don't want the smaller church to show up and go, this is too big, we can never do it, it's too, right? So we just got to make sure we're helping everybody.
If I can share this, at our church, we've always, and I pastored a church that I grew up in, and now that I look at it, 'cause there's a time I wondered why on Sundays our door, probably 98% of the time, it's not an open door. You can't, nobody can just walk in to our church. It has to be a door person. And this conversation, even listening to Deacon Coleman, I see the wisdom in that. At least you can get a pre-look down or observation, before even entering into the building, because there always has to be somebody at the door. Otherwise, you just stand there, pull the doors, and you can't come in. And hearing again Deacon say like what recently happened, I'm kind of glad. Like, okay, that's a small thing, but it can be big in these times. Back in the day, growing up, I thought it was goofy, but in today's sort of uncertainty, and I think with this training, I think that'll help us. It helps us, and we just need to build upon it.
Yeah, I'll tell you that I fight hard for access control. And people tend to think that it is off-putting to have the doors locked. And I say that it is very smart to have your doors locked and have a door person. So I try to benchmark. So I try to visit churches all around. So I went to Christ Community Church in St. Charles, and their service started, this was pre-COVID, on a Saturday night at 5:30. At 5:30, the doors lock. All across the thing, they automatically lock at 5:30. There's people strategically placed in the lobby to open the door. So when you're walking up to the door, you don't know it's locked because the person greets you and says, "Oh, welcome, come on in." You don't know that door was locked, right?
Right.
They had a
Right.
chance to look at you, assess you, determine whether or not they thought you were a threat before they opened that door, and then they got a good look at you. So I always recommend access control, and I try to get everybody to lock their doors, particularly at the beginning of services, with door greeters on that door. It is not going to be off-putting because people don't know it's locked. I had no way of knowing that door was locked except I inquired later. So I agree with that. All right, we're gonna move on to tools. So this is one, it's the pre-service safety moment calendar. We talked about that before. I believe there's a blank online. If not, we can get it for you. It's just identifying your topics when you're gonna huddle or if you're gonna email out safety topics before the weekend for services. Safety at a glance. Anybody fill this out yet? This one I know is in there. There's a blank online. Anybody start this one yet? All right, you guys got all the tools. You got to start this for your plan if you're gonna need it. So there's a blank inside that you should have gotten it in the email and it should be on the site for you to download. This is another one that I really like. So if you have a space in your lobby where there's some kind of desk for greeters, we keep the cards for vehicle description. And on the flip side of that card is a person description. And it's just that. So as opposed to making a lot of noise, you can write down a little bit of information, hand it off to a security person for them to go take a look at. A person one definitely works inside of an auditorium. What does their clothing look like? Height, approximate build, jot it down really quick and hand it off to a security person for them to go take a look at a situation. And you have it again, if you need it, if you have to call emergency response. So we can get you a copy of that too. We talked about this already in terms of Slack. You guys have not started utilizing that, but that's another one. All right, that's it for the presentation. Anybody have anything else on that? All right, so this is month 3 and these documents are out there. So next month I'm gonna be asking you again. So let me ask you guys this. Has anybody assigned writing their emergency response plan to anyone in their organization? Who's responsible for your emergency response plan?
I've started, we did one on a fire evacuation and we did do a drill in the church this past spring.
Oh, good.
But that's the only one we have. It's just for fire emergency, but it's pretty similar to the weather related one also. Yeah.
Okay. So do you own the responsibility for writing the plan? Is
Yes.
it you or is it the team or?
That's usually me. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, if you started on any of the blanks, any of the templates?
No, I'm going to though. I after tonight, I like the vehicle and person description sheet. That I think that would be really handy to have as it's a good way of communicating information there too.
Yeah, we put one on one side, one on the other and make just a little
Yeah.
card of it.
Yeah.
And just put it somewhere close by. Some people walk with them in their back pocket, you know, if they see
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, I have a question, Angela. For we have floor plans ready to hand out to first responders, but I'm concerned that that we don't want them to fall into the wrong hands either. So where would you keep those that they're readily available to hand to first responders?
Yeah, so where's your church located again?
Elk Grove.
Yeah, I would meet with the Elk Grove Police
Yeah.
and Fire, and I would give them a copy of it.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if they're really gonna have that when they respond, that there's so many different people involved and, I thought that you would keep it in your facility and hand it to the first responder that comes to the door.
Yeah,
But-
in the moment, I don't think they're gonna look at it, so we typically meet with fire and police like once a month. We let them use the building for training. We want them to know the building. We invite them in to walk the building. They're there on Sundays. So they know our building. I mean, as much as you can build that kind of relationship with them so that they know your building. They also have maps of our building in their vehicles.
Do
So-
they keep those? Do they actually keep those handy? I mean,
Keep them, yeah, they keep them in the car. So how large is your facility?
well, there's 3 connected sections of the campus. Basically, a gym, a connect area, and then the sanctuary. So, but it's all, I guess it's technically all one building.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, I think they do it for any building that's a significant size building, particularly in the suburban areas.
Yeah.
Because that's a pretty big building in their city, right?
Yeah. Okay,
You'd be
yeah,
hard pressed to get the city of Chicago to carry around your maps.
Yeah,
Too big, too many people,
right,
not,
right.
but getting the people in your district, because we have a church that I work with that's downtown Chicago. It's where we met when we first kicked off Toolkit Tuesdays. And so we work with that district and they drive past on Sunday mornings. They come into the building. We make sure they get a cup of coffee. Like we want them in the building. So you still can, even in the city, get the districts to come by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would do that beforehand. I'd have that conversation beforehand.
Yep.
Any other questions? Comments? Concerns? Y'all gotta get busy. You got all these templates out here.
Again, I'm thinking about, Pastor Coleman's scenario and, especially, they've always had, just wonderful pastors and high profile, all of us in that way, but even I'm just, we talk about pastoral, sort of protection, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're often maybe one of the most vulnerable ones, right? Like, do you recommend like someone close by? You know what I mean? Like when the pastor's not watching, who's watching?
Who's watching the pastor? Is that
Yeah, when the pastor's not watching, who's not watching? He's preaching, he or she's preaching, they doing what they're doing. That's not their mindset of something happening. So who's watching the pastor and all it? Is that
pastoral
recommended?
coverage is a big deal. So I'm
Say that again.
pastoral coverage is a big deal. It's a big deal. So I'm gonna leave that one to the Deacon Coleman because I know he has a statement about that.
Well, one thing I have to be careful of, I really am, whoo, this turns my buttons. I'm telling you, I love it. And I have to be careful because I talk too much sometimes. But Pastor Fields, it is imperative that you have someone to kind of have your back, quote unquote. But that person has to be in sync spiritually, mentally, and physically. Okay. And it doesn't necessarily have to be just one. I'm a team concept person. If you notice, the police, they don't go out with one person. They're in teams. And so it's a reason for that concept. And that's a whole nother training. That's a whole nother teaching what to do, because they can make or break the pastor. Okay. and I've been told that early on, because we had some well-known pastors, and some of them was like, y'all act like y'all the Secret Service, y'all got all this stuff, y'all got this and y'all got this. You can't even shake the pastor hand, and the pastor belongs to the people, and so it's a balance. You gotta know how to flow. And in the Christian church, that's another technique that needs to be shown and talked about on how you do it and how you go with the flow, and yet still be able to kind of position yourself to do your best to protect them and that kind of thing, him or her. And so that's, to your point, I think it is necessary, but it's not necessary on all levels, right? If the church and the pastor is not making any noise per se, then the threat ratio is not as great. And then that's something that you all have to assess overall. I'm just speaking in general now. What is the threat ratio, or potential threat ratio? And so, because some people just do it for prestigious purposes or reasons, and it's not necessary.
Right.
And then on one respect, it is necessary, because the larger you grow, the bigger you get. All of that's equated to dollars and cents, opportunities, and you become more vulnerable and that kind of thing. So, yeah, but that's a whole nother kind of teaching, training kind of thing.
Add that one to your list, Dee.
Angelique.
Well, I'm not security. I tell people that all the time. I'm safety, right? So I don't get involved in trying to train security teams on what security teams should be doing. I'm trying to train the whole on how we communicate with security teams and how we protect the church in its function, right?
But you do know that it's a thin line between the two.
There is, but
and I'll tell you why, real. I'm sorry.
No, I was saying there is a distinct difference though, but people perceive it to be all the same, right? Security's never going to sit down and write an emergency response plan. They're not going to talk to the insurance company about trying to get, better rates because we got a better plan. They're not going to work on reunification and putting together family and victim assistance centers if we have to move everybody out. Like there's a distinct difference between safety and security, but they have to overlap and work hand in hand. Those two things have to work together. But I'm not a security person, right? So I know as much as I know, and then I defer to the Deacon Coleman. Okay.
Well, I mean, again, some of it's synonymous. Some of it is one and the same, almost in some regards.
Overlap for sure.
Yeah, but the safety components encompasses quite a bit. And if you don't have the staffing, or the experience, it's a one-shop stop. It's a one-shop.
And most churches don't have somebody worrying about safety. They have somebody just doing security, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, because see, with me, I had to deal with it all, right? And there's so many different layers to this, right? Because we talk about the what if something happens, right? But we never, not you, Angela, I know you do, but we never really emphasize and talk about post-op.
Right.
What happens after a tragedy? What happens? How do you gather yourself if something happens?
Right.
Can you still function as a church?
Right.
Reunification. I mean, you still got to have those pieces in play in the church too.
Yeah.
You have to create an incident command center. Or who's your incident commander if something goes wrong until first responders arrive? Right. And so that's other thinking, other conversations, with small to mid-sized to large kind of churches, right? Where your mega churches, they should have that kind of those levels in play. But we have medical ministry. We got a lot of players in the game, but it's hard centralizing this thing. It's
Right.
hard bringing people together as one, you know? And so if something happens, they automatically, well, that's security. Well, okay. Who in terms of security? If you don't have a large, security staff, and I don't like to call them security. And I think I may have expressed that reason. Because if you're not under anybody's licenses, you're a volunteer at the church, and that's a liable issue. And
Yeah.
so we really need to put emphasis on the name, what we call people.
True,
And
but
make sure that
I don't know that we're gonna be, you're exactly right. I just don't know if we're gonna be able to, we can eventually turn people's thinking away from that word, because it's what they
I know
use.
it's loaded, but
And-
if I'm sorry, I'm hold on.
I'm sorry.
No, my volume, I'm trying to adjust my volume so I can hear.
Yeah,
Hold on. Can you hear me?
we hear you.
Okay. I'm not getting the feedback. But anyway, it's something that we have to impress upon people, because like I say, I can probably go into any church and sue the church because they don't know the difference. They don't know the understanding of what you have. Now, in some churches, they do have real security. They pay for their security.
Right.
But in other times, if you have volunteers enacting security practices, that can be a problem. And that's a hurtful thing for me, because I've trained churches on the west side. I can't remember the name, Pastor Fields, but they were so proud of the work that they did. Somebody came in they thought was disrupting. They pulled this young man out of the church, literally out of his clothes, by dragging him, and they thought they did a good job. So
wow.
Yeah,
that was out of ignorance, and that's a real story. And
No, no,
so
That's
I don't
awful.
want people. We say it's awful,
It
but
is.
I'm looking at the young man's heart of trying to protect the premise of the church in ignorance. And if he had known, I'm sure, because when I finished talking with him, when I finished dealing with him, he apologized to me, and that happened a long time. He apologized. Well, you shouldn't be able to apologize to me. I just want you to have the information
right.
and the techniques you use to first of all let somebody know that they are trespassing, so that they have to leave. And if they don't, then you call the people, and if they still refuse, then you kind of contain them physically with people that surround them, where they have to push through you, and everybody have a right to protect themselves. So it's just some techniques we can revisit and talk about. So
Well, thanks for
I
sharing.
told y'all I talk too much. Y'all need to stop doing it to me, because sometimes I can't help it.
Nobody did anything to you.
I'm gonna be quiet. That's what I'm gonna do, because y'all,
We appreciate
this
you.
is tough.
No, it's very informative, Deacon. I mean, I've gleaned a lot from just you sharing, so it's all good.
I appreciate that.
Anybody else have any questions or comments before we wrap this up? All right, I need you guys to get busy on your templates, because I'm gonna ask you again next month. And I need you guys to make sure you get your people to the conference and invite any other folks. If you need, we'll put the flyer out on the website too. I think it's already out there.
What's the date? August what?
5th.
Okay.
It's on the website. I pulled it from the website.
Okay. So please share that with other churches and friends and invite people to come along. I know one person sent me a note and asked, was it too late for them to start? No, everything's out there by the month. So they can go back and start pulling their templates down and working on it and bringing it with them. And I think it's gonna be good. Well, anybody want to close? How about you, Dee?
I'm sorry.
Close us out in prayer.
I will. Bow your heads where you are. Eternal God, our Father, again, we thank you for this setting, this meeting of the minds. We thank you, oh God, for being in the midst. Oh God, we pray for those, oh God, who just want to see their churches in a particular way that, you know, you're our protector, of course, but we also want to do our due diligence by being watchmen on the wall. And so we pray that you would empower us, give us wisdom from on high, oh God, that we don't move hastily, but that we move according to your will and your way. We thank you for each one assembled on this line. We pray that you will bless their households, their families, that they will be in good health and wealth, and just keep them, oh God, as you are our keeper. In Jesus' name we do pray. Amen.
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 Amen. Amen.
Amen.
God bless you all.